All right, everybody, welcome to the Halloween special here with the Canadian Immigration Institute. I'm Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, together for the first time with all of the lawyers in our firm, Alicia, Chanelle, Cedric. How are you guys doing?
Great. Happy Halloween.
How are you doing over there, Cedric?
Doing fantastic, Mark. How are you, cowboy?
I'm doing good. See, it's Halloween today, so at the very least, I had to put on my genuine, authentic cowboy hat and the string tie that I got. I don't know, boy, you can see it's like a bronc on here. It's a little shiny. This is genuine, authentic gear, so worn and tested on the back of a quarter horse, so it's all legit. Anyways, how are you doing, Alicia?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I've got, the witch's gloves happening on
Mm-hmm.
today, so in roll doll fashion.
Nice. Awesome. Well, as you guys know, and as we've been promoting, this is our Canadian Immigration Horror Stories episode. Yes. And we thought it was fitting to share some of our most horrific immigration stories that we have had to deal with. And it's not just what we're dealing with, but it's the consequences that our clients suffered as a result of bad things happening. Sometimes they just trusted the wrong people. Sometimes they hired the wrong representative. Sometimes they just tried it on their own and it just didn't work. And so we're going to take some opportunities to share our stories. And then today is all about you guys as well. At the end, we're going to save some time for you to share. So not questions today, you guys. The Q&A is going to be Wednesday and Thursday, and Cedric's got his as well. So definitely the Q&As will give time for it. But today I want you to post in the comments your horror stories as well, and we'll pull those up. And but we've got a good group of people that are here today, and we'll give a couple shout outs as we jump into the initial section here. Let me just make some changes here. I've got a bunch of different windows and things. Okay, so here we go. Let's pull up a few comments and see who else we have tuned in here. So we've got Bernard. Happy Halloween to you. Good to have you here with us. We'll drop this down just a little bit there. And then Igor is connecting in. He says, wow, this looks awesome. You bet. Phil did a great job. We've got Ali here. Great work, Mark. And hello from, where is that? Which flag is that, you guys? Can you guys see?
Pakistan. It's Pakistan.
Oh, Pakistan. There we go. Okay, we've got Ralph as always. Hello, Ralph. Meet Shaw back again. Hello to you. We've got Pujitha says hello, team. Hello to you. And Ralph says Fantastic Four. Yes, indeed. We are all here. The Sir is here as well. Hello, guys. Hope everyone's doing great. We're doing awesome, my friend. And then we've got another happy Halloween from a LinkedIn user here. And yeah, just keep posting the comments. Eric, nice. I like the emojis. Hey, check this out, Eric. I've got something to there you go. A matching emoji there. It's a live one and a little bit of thunder to go along with it. Trinad, happy Halloween to you. Let's see, post in the comments where you guys are tuning in from, because we love to hear where you're connecting in on this special Halloween day. Carla says hello from the Dominican Republic. You're are awesome. We've got Monica from Mexico. Happy to see you. Happy Halloween. Now is the Day of the Dead in Mexico, is that the same as our Halloween, or is that a different holiday entirely? I can't remember. One of my staff members in the past was really big into that stuff. And all right, so Ralph's giving us a happy Halloween as well from Edmonton. So today, like I said, is all about us sharing our scary immigration stories. And hopefully not too many people will be screaming and running away. But this is just an episode to help you guys understand what's really happening with Canadian immigration. And I'll be honest, and I think, the other lawyers can probably confirm with me, it's not as fun as it used to be practicing immigration law. The consequences of the smallest mistake are just so catastrophic at times. And unlike when I first started practice, there was a way to fix almost everything, right, Alicia? Like there was always someone that you could talk to. People were reasonable. There was an ability to get before the person who was actually processing the application. And over the years, it slowly disappeared. And so now we have to be so vigilant to make sure that there is nothing wrong with the applications. I don't know if you guys have any comments or thoughts on that.
I just add to that, Mark, that it's also the law that's been changing as well. So, and that's in my horror story, I'll talk about some legal changes that a bunch of people I still find don't know about, and it has devastating consequences for people's families.
Yes. All right. Well, why don't we dive in, and who is going to be the first one to share their story? Chanelle, are you up first?
I will. And my story, I think, relates really good to what we just covered with how a very tiny mistake can cause big consequences. So this story is about a client who came to us when it was too late, after they had already tried doing their application themselves. And overall, the application was a very strong application. They actually were lucky enough to have a provincial nomination, which gave them all the points they needed to be drawn for express entry, and went through the process, submitted everything themselves, but it was rejected. Looking into why it was rejected, they discovered they made a very small error, which is something that I think a lot of people make, and it came down to the police certificates. Now, they were applying from Australia, where they were temporarily living, and had to get an Australian police certificate. That is a complicated process because there are like 100 different options for police certificates. They all really reveal the same information and they look almost identical, with the only key difference being the title of the police certificate, what's written at the top of it. And they made a common mistake, which is selecting, when they ordered it, an immigration police certificate, which you think would be suitable, but it's specifically the overseas visa certificate that you need for Canadian immigration, or there are a number of other employment-related police certificates which are also acceptable. So the client went on to order the police certificate, saw immigration for the purpose of needing it and selected that, didn't think about it any further. When they uploaded it to the upload link in their application, the instructions said, to upload the police certificate. It didn't specify what title police certificate they needed. The information is quite generic when you're uploading. And it was only a very long time later, because this is also during the pandemic, so after like 12 months of waiting for processing, finally got denied. Looking into it, has realized the error, has tried a reconsideration. That didn't work because obviously IRCC didn't make a mistake. They were right in rejecting it based on that police certificate, given that technically the instructions weren't followed correctly. And as a result, he lost his nomination. So trying to go back to the province to see if he can get a new nomination didn't work, and having to really now start from scratch. So somebody in a situation who needs to find ways to increase their points, either try and get a new nomination or try and get an LMIA job offer to get extra points for that, or consider other options for coming to Canada eventually, maybe to pursue studies. But really, if eventually he is successful in getting another nomination, getting some sort of visa to come to Canada, it's going to have set him back 2 or 3 years in the process. And the thing is, he may never succeed, may never get the points needed. So it really cost him his chance of coming to Canada over a very small error. But I think the key lesson to take away from that is, you are responsible for your application. You're responsible for doing the work to research what is needed. Don't just trust what seems logical. It often is not the case. And don't just trust what the upload links are asking for when you're filling out your application. Google it, research it, book a consultation to check things. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of information on our website. So spend the extra time researching your application to make sure you're 110% sure that everything you are submitting is correct.
Exactly. That's pretty much the situation. If you're tuning in late, this is what we have going on. All right, so Chanelle shared the first one, which is just going to set the stage for progressively worse situations. Although losing your opportunity to immigrate to Canada, I don't know what can be worse than that. But Who do we have next? Who wants to share next?
I can go ahead and jump in here, guys. And Mark,
Okay.
I just wanted to add that I'm not too sure if it's a Halloween costume if you wear the cowboy costume every weekend, you know?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. You know, but it's the orange shirt that I'm not seen in public with. So this
Oh.
is the one that comes out special on Halloween.
And I wanted to add for viewers who can't see me, I had a fun Halloween costume myself, which included putting Smarty Pants on my pants, and then I was a Smarty Pants. So for Halloween, so a little bit low effort, but I did think it was a nice play on words. But there we have it. Let's get to it. My immigration horror stories, and for my work as a law clerk at the federal court, and now dealing with a lot of rejections and refusals, I tend to see a lot of misrepresentations. So if we just take a few steps back to set the stage, right? Under Section 16, you have the obligation to answer truthfully to all the questions put forward to you. You also have a duty of candor, right? So even though they don't necessarily ask you, have you changed address? Is your job offer still valid? You do have an obligation to disclose this to IRCC when there's a change of circumstances. And under Section 40, if you directly or indirectly withhold material facts, you could be found to have a misrepresentation. And what is so spooky about the misrepresentation is the 5-year ban. And that comes along with it. Very spooky. I rarely see someone saying, IRCC saying, you were not truthful and not give out a misrepresentation or a 5-year ban. It's usually if you don't meet the obligation to be answered truthfully, you can have a 5-year ban. So my story takes place to do with there's multiple little stories, right, with big consequences, right? And we can start from a story which took place actually quite recently, and it involves essentially an individual that did not properly answer the question about rejected visas, right? So a lot of the permanent resident, even the temporary resident applications, they have a question asking you, have you been rejected a visa, have you ever been deported, and whatnot. And you need to really pay attention to the question because it is very important, right? They're going to ask you about rejection. So this particular individual had only declared one of the 3 events. In other words, there was rejections, there were deportations, there was denied applications, rejected applications, but they decided to focus on what they believe was most important, which was the deportation. However, there was also previous visa refusals that were not disclosed. Now, Chanelle, as you said, when IRCC is right, sometimes there's very little that you can do, right? If you've actually been refused multiple visas and you do not disclose it, it can lead to a 5-year ban, which is very spooky. So in those cases, we work with our clients for procedural fairness letters. We try, obviously, if it's get rejected, go to the judicial review. So that's my first scary story in terms of answering the question. The second one comes down to family members, right? There's forms that ask about family members. Read the question very carefully. If you don't declare them, the general rule, right? If we don't declare them at the time of the application for permanent resident applications, they cannot be sponsored after. And so some people, they read the form too quickly. They don't realize that it includes common law spouses, right? They don't realize that they had to declare all the children, including have-children's and from previous marriages, custody, whether or not you had custody, it doesn't matter. They have to be declared, right? So those are 2 common mistakes that I see when I do litigation for rejected applications with serious horror stories of 5-year bans.
All right. Well, I think one of the things that everybody is probably used to us saying is that it's not nearly as easy as immigration makes it seem. And when we're in a world of, and maybe I'll go next, Alicia, in a world where there is so much information out there. Now, it's not as cool as us with our cowboy hats. And I think someone said that I've got the Halloween spirit here, I believe. Yes, they did. And I have control over the comments that come on the screen, so I can pretty much pull up whatever I want, like the bottom saying that, I've got a nice hat. But the reality is, out there in internet land, you can get all kinds of information, right? All kinds of information. Information that is, well, I guess it's kind of helpful, but the reality is you don't know whether you can trust it or not. So there's lots of people who've gone through the process themselves, and this is the one I'm going to... Yeah, it's definitely this one. This is one that makes me scream. That's actually me screaming. I recorded that special for this episode after I remembered this story, and I'm going to flip back here to our full screen. Right here on the YouTube channel, you will see that I have this, and this was 3 years ago, heartbreaking immigration story. I had to share it this time just because, well, it's been a while since I've talked about that story. But here's what happened. So I'll set the stage. Just like many of you DIYers out there, you belong to every kind of WhatsApp group. You've subscribed to our channel. You subscribe to, there's tons of YouTube channels out there with people offering helpful information. Often where it starts is someone goes through the process, they apply themselves, and then they become an immigration, they become a permanent resident of Canada. And then they proclaim themselves as being immigration experts because they did it themselves. And if you follow exactly what they did, your application is going to get, it's going to get approved, right? No, not necessarily. So here's what happened. And those of you who are familiar with Express Entry, this is where we're diving in. It's so easy because there are so many examples because the process is so cruel and heartless. But this nice couple booked a consult with me. They told me their story. So they had some friends that had actually submitted the application before them. But there was a lot of discussion about what you need to include in work history and what you don't. These friends told them that the accompanying spouse, in this case the husband, that you didn't need to put the work history in the work history section because you're not claiming points for it. And in fairness, I agree with that statement. But they went one step further and said, because you've put that in the work history, you need to list that his work history or whatever he was doing in the personal history section, that he was unemployed, so it matches. Okay, so you guys can see the problem here. So in the personal history section, they said, you're not going to actually put what he was doing. You're going to say unemployed so that it matches with the work history, and then you don't have to include any documents. So this is the world that we're dealing with right now. You know where this is going. So they dutifully followed the instructions of their friends. Why? Because that's exactly what their friends did, and their application was approved, right? Well, the problem is sometimes people who go through the process themselves submit information, submit their documentation, answer questions a certain way, and it gets approved, even though the way they did it was wrong. Why? Because offices are under tight timelines. They run out of time processing these applications. Their backlogs are huge. They're racing, to get through things. They overlook things themselves. So sometimes people sneak through thinking that they did everything just magnificently correct, and because their application got approved, and then they share that with everyone else. Back to these clients. So they came to me because they received a procedural fairness letter. And the letter obviously said, because it was an officer who was experienced, realized, wait a minute, he has no work experience over the last 10 years. Okay, there's really nothing you've done except being unemployed. So that procedural fairness letter came back saying, please provide an updated background declaration, which was code for, we think you misrepresented something in your beginning application, and therefore we want you to respond. And in fact, in that request, they had alleged there was misrepresentation. So this goes back to, and I'm going to shift my screen back here, go to our firm website right here, and remind all of you that last October, Alicia and I covered this whole topic on misrepresentation that is on our website. So all you have to do is go to Holthe Immigration Law, click on blog post, and pull up this one. So this misrepresentation one, we also did a video on it as well, but goes into the problems and the ins and outs, and Cedric is alleged, talked about it a little bit as well. But the reality is this couple, by following their friend's advice, who they got approved, so why do you dare question them? They got themselves into a massive problem. Now, they booked a consult with me. So I helped them to draft a properly worded response to that procedural fairness letter. It could have been absolutely disastrous for them, but we took a lot of time. They literally fell on the sword. They took responsibility. They said it was stupid for us to listen to our friends. We are so sorry. Please, please do not basically destroy our only opportunity at immigrating to Canada. And in the end, that client, both of them went away, and I did not hear from them again. Usually that's code for things worked out. But this is the problem, you guys, that you see. This is the problem that makes me scream. It's because there's so many helpful people out there that are trying to save you money. They're trying to give you advice based on legitimately their experience. But the reality is their experience may not be in accordance with the law, and an officer could have missed it. So that is my horror story. And I could give you 5 other experiences where it didn't turn out that well. And we weren't able to fix it. But for the purposes of this, I wanted to illustrate that just because someone is out there holding themselves as the newest immigrant, creating a fancy YouTube channel, and they have hundreds of thousands of views telling you what to do, my goodness, understand, as Alicia will get to, the law changes, circumstances change, and they may have gotten PR when really their application should have been refused. And once your application is refused because you relied upon some helpful person on the internet, well, guess where they're going to be when you reach out to them and say, what do I do now? I wish I had a crickets button. I don't know, not that one, but if I had crickets, it would be that. They're nowhere to be found. No one you can turn to because you relied on someone that, although they had the best of interests, and even family are sometimes the worst, there's no recourse. All right, Alicia, that is it. And those of you who are tuning in, Alicia's going to share her next story, but those who are wondering what the heck Mark's doing here, this is what we're doing. Awesome. Okay, I want to remind everyone before we shift over to Alicia that I want you to share your horror story below. And after Alicia shares hers, then we'll pull them up and we'll talk a little bit about this. Remember, if you have a question about immigration, connect in. Cedric's going live. I'm live Wednesday mornings. Alicia and I are out on Thursdays. So there's lots of places to ask questions. This one's all about you sharing your horror stories. All right, Alicia, over to you.
All right, so I have a horror story. It starts innocently enough. We have a 12-year-old girl. Her name is Maria, and she's living with her family in Colombia. And sadly, Maria's dad suffers from chronic illness. He's got recurrent cancer, and he's mentally ill. And FARC is targeting this poor family. And Maria's mom decides she's going to take Maria and her siblings, and they're going to get to Canada, and they're going to make a refugee claim. And they do. So this story is starting to go well. They make their refugee, they get to Canada. Dad's still back in Colombia because he's too ill, but mom and the kids are here with Maria. And Maria's only 12 years old, so she's a minor. And she's added to this refugee claim. And lo and behold, they get their refugee claim accepted. The Immigration Refugee Protection Division in Canada says, yes, we agree with you. We think that you guys are all refugees. You're going to be granted protected person status. So great. Maria is now a protected person, so is her mom, so are her siblings. And this all happens way back in 2010, guys. So this story starts a while ago, over a decade ago. 2010, she gets her refugee claim accepted. And then, I don't know how many of you know anything about refugee applications, but whenever you make that refugee application, you have to surrender your passport. And if you're accepted as that refugee, then you eventually get your passport back. And hopefully people tell you, don't ever use this passport. Don't ever apply for a new one. But I don't know if anybody told that to Maria's parents or Maria's mom, because Maria, unfortunately, applies for a new passport in 2011. Well, her mom applies for her because she's still a child. And all right, she's applied for a passport. And people might think, okay, well, that's not a problem. What's so wrong about applying for a passport back from Colombia? Well, we'll get to that, but nobody realizes that the act of applying for a passport when you've been found to be a refugee could in and of itself jeopardize your refugee status. So this happens in 2011, and in 2012, Maria's mom is on the ball. Maria's mom realizes, okay, we now have 2 years of residency as PRs. We're going to apply, well, we have Canadian residency. We're going to apply for permanent residency after 2 years. And she does, and they get accepted in 2012. But here's what happens in 2012 also. The law changes, and the law says if for any reason, or if for specific reasons, immigration is going to take away your protected person status, then it also is automatically going to take away your permanent resident status. And you have no right of appeal, and you have no ability to submit a humanitarian and compassionate application or a pre-removal risk assessment for at least a year. And you're inadmissible to Canada, and Canadian CBSA officers should remove you as soon as possible. So that happens in 2012, and nobody really pays too much attention to it. So Maria, she's a young woman. She decides to go back to Colombia to help her ailing father, right? He's still back in Colombia. She travels back on her Colombian passport to go back to take care of her sick father. And then on her last visit, she's almost 18. She goes back on a humanitarian aid mission, guys, to help poor children in Colombia. She knows that Colombia is not safe, so she hires a security guard, private security. She uses different vehicles. She takes different routes. She doesn't go out in public as much as possible. And she's turned 18, so she realizes she can't travel home on her child passport. And so Colombian authorities tell her you need to apply for an adult passport in order to get back to Canada. So she does. She comes back to Canada, and she realizes that, things are okay, maybe, with her dad. So she doesn't go back to see him right then. She goes to Mexico, and she goes to the US. And then what happens is a few years go by, and all of a sudden in 2017, the minister says, we're going to take away your refugee status out of the blue, right? So they do. They call her for a cessation hearing to the RPD in 2019. They say, you re-availed yourself of the protection of Colombia. The fact that you had applied for a passport as a child, and the fact that you applied for a passport as an adult, and the fact that you traveled back to Colombia on a few occasions, and the US and Mexico with your Colombian passport, means you've re-availed yourself. We're going to take away your refugee protection. And the refugee board says, yeah, we're going to strip you of your refugee protection. So that is way back in 2019. Maria luckily finds a lawyer, or a group of lawyers, and she goes to federal court, and it's not us, guys, it's a different law firm, but she goes to federal court in 2020, and the federal court says, you know what, we don't think the Refugee Protection Division was correct in taking away your refugee status. We're going to send it back to the RPD for another decision. And you might think Maria's okay here, but guess what? The minister intervenes, and the minister says, no way. We want to take Maria's refugee protection away. We're going to take this to the Federal Court of Appeal. So it's now 2022. We're fast forward to today. This has now been going on since Maria is 12 years old. Her status has been in jeopardy the whole time, and luckily at the Federal Court of Appeal. So this is the most recent case on cessation. Federal Court of Appeal. The Federal Court of Appeal decides that, you know what, the Refugee Protection Board was unreasonable. The federal court is correct, or is reasonable in making sure that this decision goes back to a new decision maker. And so it will go back to the RPD. But the bad news for Maria here is she's still not safe, right? All she was doing was being a kid. Most of the stuff happened when she was still a minor. She couldn't control whether her mom applied for the passport. She tried to go back to help her sick father. She tried to go help kids in Colombia on a humanitarian aid mission. And she may lose everything, right? She's been in Canada since 2012, and she may lose everything. So there are a number of takeaways that I wanted to highlight from this. And one is that the statistics are not good. The number of cessation cases are on the rise. So we have the stats from 2012 to 2015, and in 2012 there were 30 cases. of cessation, and 2013 there was 47, 2014 there was 155, 2015 there were 256, and then fast forward to 2019, and apparently 88% of cases where the minister is bringing cessation proceedings are resulting in loss of status. So a lot of people, and I have heard terrible stories from people who are refugees. A lot of people don't know that they should never travel on their passport from the country that they successfully claimed refugee status against, even if it's to a different country. And then they should certainly not go back to their home country. And it really puts everything at risk. So be super, super careful. Make sure that you don't travel back. Make sure you don't travel back to your home country to get married and then try to sponsor that person.
Thanks, Alicia. All right. And I guess the overarching takeaway from that, if you're to look at immigration generally, is that gone are the days when immigration officers are kind, or they are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, or they're willing to, allow you to fix something that you made a mistake with. It's really, they're merciless. And so I think we can see that as a common thread throughout all of these stories that we've shared. Okay, let's, Eric says, wow, I did not know that. There you go. And Eric also asked this question, which Alicia, I don't think we can answer. And remember, guys, if there is something specific, and we will go to some comments, remember, what I want you to post is your immigration horror stories. I want to hear these because people don't talk about it. If you make a mistake or something bad happens, people don't go and shout it on their YouTube channel or their WhatsApp group. They don't want people to know that they made a mistake, because everybody makes you feel like you must be stupid if you made a mistake. You must not be as smart as me, who was able to figure it all out and get it approved, which, as we know from my story, doesn't necessarily mean that you know anything more than someone else. But anyways, that's, Eric says, can you get back into the process of your refugee claim after 2 to 3 years not responding? So this one, and this is my new bell for Halloween, it's the freaky gong. I strongly encourage you guys, if you are in a situation where any of this has happened to you, or you're just not wanting to experience these things, slide over to our website and click Speak to a Lawyer right here, and it'll take you right to one of the lawyers, all of us. You can choose. We're all here, all available, and it's really easy to book a consult. We can help you guys navigate your way through this so that you're not in that type of a situation. And, I know there's a little bit of dramatic effect here that I'm throwing in with, we've got things falling from the ceiling here. We've got, bats that are flying across and ghosts drifting across the screen. But I'll be honest, it is scary. And even for us lawyers, when we're helping people, there's a certain level of anxiety that happens every time we help you click submit. And the last thing in the world that we want is to have overlooked something, or to have not gotten all the facts or information that we need to really properly advise you. And so when we use our collaborative review model to work with you, that model is specifically designed to increase in every way possible the chances that we're going to get it right. And it seems ridiculous to even talk about chances or likelihood. But when you have uploaded, for example, a black and white copy of a German police clearance certificate instead of the color copy, and that results in your whole application getting returned for express entry, that's just one little element or one little piece of the consequences that can happen when you've made the slightest mistake, even when they're technical or even so small that they don't even impact on the validity of the processing of your application. But that's the world we're in right now. So let's slide back here and let's get to a few comments and questions that people are putting in here. Okay, let's see. So we have Katamba says, Cedric, my story is worst. It was worth being shared, he says, Katamba. I don't know if you had a consult, Cedric, with Katamba. Cedric, I'm proud of your services. Did you have a consult with Katamba?
Yeah, Katamba. Yeah, solicitor client privilege, Katamba. I don't think it's really appropriate to speak about it on our live Q&A. We don't talk about specifics or any of that. Katamba, Tumba, and I appreciate you wanting to share, but we do have to respect the Law Society rules with client confidentiality, so we can't get into it. But I appreciate your willingness, Kamban.
Yes.
It's Ismail. Ismail is his first name. I appreciate your willingness.
You bet. So we can assume that things did not go well with Ismail and his attempts. Okay. Okay, let's see. Addie says, oh, wait a minute. Let's see. I've got a couple things going on. So here's a story. This one is from Addie. She says, did not know it is about horror stories. So here's my story. We applied for a study permit and a spousal open work permit and visitor visa from India. And RCC did their thing and just rejected the spousal open and visitor visa first. Nothing on the study permit. Then the response is after 3 months, they woke up and rejected the study permit as well. So you can imagine this is not uncommon. We see this a lot, right? Chanelle, you work with a lot of people on the study permit side, and the biggest issue, you guys, is that you just don't know sometimes what you don't know. And often what they're really looking at isn't even on the guide or the checklist.
And sometimes even if the study permit's approved, it doesn't mean that the spousal work permit will be, or the visitor visa. So then, a lot of families have to come to that difficult decision whether one family member leaves for a couple of years to pursue their studies and the spouse and children stay back at home.
Brutal situations. Okay, let's see what else we have here. So next on our list, we've got a couple little happy Halloweens we'll share. So G2D2 says hello. And let's see who else we have here. Dima says, happy to see you all here today. It is kind of fun for us all to be here. Let's see what else we have here. We've got Jama. He said from South Africa tuning in. Lots of flags. That's awesome. Kay Taylor says, you went all out with those graphics and sound effects. Yes, I did. All right. Let's see what else we have here. And then we've got Harmony, who's tuning in from Kenya. And then my favorite of all is Carfy, who says, nice hut, cowboy. Okay, we'll assume that's hat. All right, so I'll post this. This is going to be a big one. It's going to take over our screen, but this is a classic example of something I want to share. So we're going to pull this up. This is a comment from LinkedIn. Apparently, LinkedIn allows you to write write a novel, but we'll pull it up. Let's see how big. Okay, it's big. That's all right. So let's just read through this very quickly. So this person's been working for a Canadian company on a contract basis for a year from India. They helped with a positive LMIA, and with that, they applied for a work permit through a consultancy in Canada, so immigration consultants. Similarly, there are 3 more people who applied, and theirs got approved. Unfortunately, my work permit application was rejected. The reason? Valid LMIA number not submitted. But my consultancy people say they did submit the LMIA number and the LMIA document. So this, I'm glad, the reason I brought this up, let's pull this one down. Whoops, wrong one here. Let's pull this down. The reason I brought that comment up, you guys, is because we see this all the time. And one of the most important things that we would encourage all of you to do, whether you're doing it yourself, obviously, or whether you're hiring a representative to assist you, never, ever, ever allow any application to be submitted on your behalf without having had a chance to review it personally yourself. And far too often, representatives out there are just lazy. They don't take the time to give you a look at the application. And in some cases, they don't want you to see it to see how crappy of a job they did. But the reality is the onus is on you. The obligation is on you to make sure that everything being submitted is correct, even though you use a representative. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or comments on that one.
Yeah, and I've seen similar things happen. It's tricky when you're overseas and you don't feel like you have control of the process because the company wants to use whoever they're using, right? Their consultant or their lawyer or whatever it is. But it's still your application. And so if you're signing off on those forms, the work permit application form, the 1295 itself has a field that says, what is the LMIA number? And it says, what is the job? And what is the address for the job? And what are the job duties? And you should never, ever, ever be signing a blank form. So when you look at that 1295, you should see that LMIA number filled in. You should see the job description. You should see the job title and duties and the employer's full name and address. And if you don't, that's a red flag for you. The other thing is that the company has an obligation to give you a copy of that LMIA page that shows that you were a named employee on it. So make sure that you ask for that and that you actually see it.
Excellent. Okay, let's go to a few questions here. I'm going to pull up and I'll let you guys kind of chime in here. We'll post this one here. It says, I always listen to Mark. Nice seeing Chanelle. We have a consult this week. Very cool, angel child. I'm sure. Oh, let's see. I've got too many things going on here. Sorry. We'll definitely, I know Chanelle will be looking forward to that. Okay.
I
So
think it's tomorrow. I look forward to it.
Is that tomorrow? Okay, great. Awesome.
So.
Okay. So the next question, this is from King. He said, I applied for an SDS application. My agent wrote the wrong course type to be taken in Canada. I have an advanced diploma. He wrote college applied degree. Will it create an issue or we have attached or we have to attach an LOA? Whatever that is. Any thoughts on
the letter
this,
of acceptance?
Letter of acceptance. Okay, there we go. So what are your thoughts on that? Anyone have any thoughts when you know that something's been screwed up in the application?
The best thing to do is correct it. If the application's still pending, submit a web form, bringing it to IRCC's attention and providing the correct information.
Any other thoughts? Okay, let's jump to the next one. So the next one here, this is from Eric, and this is a great question. Eric says, why should you hire a lawyer when applying to sponsor your spouse? Is it that difficult to do it yourself? How can a lawyer help you, or is the success rate much higher? So who wants to tackle this one? Alicia?
I'll go for that one. So sponsoring your spouse has become much more technically difficult, right? It used to be that you could do paper application forms and submit an actual stack of applications and send that off to immigration by paper. And that is no longer the case. So if you are sponsoring your spouse, it now has to be through the new PR portal. The problem with this is that the PR portal has a number of issues with it. It doesn't have its full functionality right now. And even looking at the guides, I just helped a couple file their spousal sponsorship last week. And even looking at the guides, there's inconsistent information in terms of the complete guide, the document checklist, and their online PR portal page that says how you actually sign and complete documents. So there's a number of workarounds. There's a number of really paranoid things that I try to implement to make sure that it is the most foolproof application possible so that when an IRCC officer opens that up, it's clear 5 ways from Sunday that all the documents and all the supporting information are there. So it's just more difficult. There are things that applicants applying on their own simply don't realize, don't know in terms of what the legal definitions are for common law spouses, what sort of supporting evidence they need to put in there, and just how all these things work together. So it's really like having somebody who's critical and trying to help you. It's like we put ourselves in the situation of an immigration officer saying, well, wait, what about this? And I see a hole here and I see a gap here, and this doesn't make sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to me, it's probably not going to make sense to an immigration officer. So it's a strong way to double check everything in your application.
Yeah. I'll give a couple other examples. So with the online filing now, and Alicia pointed out, sometimes there's lots of confusion about even little things like whether or not you need to sign the forms or otherwise. And it's these small little things that seem almost inconsequential that can be so disastrous. And in many cases, people are really anxious. There's reasons why they want to get this permanent resident filed and approved as quickly as possible. And, over the years, we've had varying levels of processing times. There was periods of time where, you didn't even know if your application was accepted until, especially through the pandemic, for up to a year. Well, I had some clients that had filed an application. They booked a consult after, which is usually the case, and they'd typed their name in one form without physically signing it on top of it. And what happened? Well, it was, I think, 3 or 4 months later, they finally got around to returning it as being incomplete. And that is the least consequential result. So the least severe consequence, yeah, getting your application returned. Theoretically, you can resubmit it, but you've lost all of that time. And when I look at this situation, I compare it to other circumstances like express entry. That invitation to apply that you received may never come again. And, you know, we're sharing lots of stories here. I just had a client who got a nomination through the Alberta Express Entry stream. Fantastic. Awesome. I have something for that too. Let's see. I have this one here. So, celebration. There's some nice fall colors. They were so happy, so ecstatic. And then they took and submitted the application to IRCC, and unfortunately, they made a mistake. They uploaded, in that case, the wrong ECA. And some people may say, well, if you're smart, you're not going to do that. Well, hell yeah, sure. Nobody's perfect. The reality is when you're going through this process, having someone there that you trust to look over and make sure that those little things are not missed. I don't think there's a single application that I review where I don't find something in there that was overlooked or the person just didn't understand what they were supposed to do. Well, the consequences for this lady here in Alberta was that her nomination through the province is a one-shot deal. When her application got rejected, her profile was locked, and that profile was the one associated with that nomination. And so that opportunity was gone. And she is not in a position with high CRS where she will be able to just go back into the pool, which immigration tells everybody, it's not a big deal getting your application returned. You can just resubmit it, right? Why do they do that? Speed. But ultimately for her, there may not come another opportunity. And as her work permit starts to run out, you know, that's the issue. And so those of you who just share information and help one another, that's awesome. I love the fact that the community is just so large. But very, very often there are people out there who are professing that they are the experts. I've seen their YouTube channels and I'm horrified. I'm almost tempted to go and just call some of them out, but I'm not going to. But telling you that, just giving the impression it's so easy, anybody can do it. And it is simply not. And with the spousal, you're establishing the genuineness of your relationship. And if you're not doing a good enough job, the onus is on you, and your application gets rejected, then you're in a serious, serious heap of trouble. And for us lawyers, we'd by far rather have you guys call us in advance, book a consult, let us help you so that you don't run into these horror stories. And no one, not a single one of our clients ever expected or were looking for this consequence. They genuinely thought they were doing everything right, everything was fine, and there was no issues until they get this shocking refusal letter or this indication their application had been returned.
And I'll add to that too, Mark, just to go back to my story. And it's actually a federal court of appeal case, and it's Galindo Camayo is the name of the applicant. But keep in mind, and this dovetails with Cedric's little stories on misrep as well, so this is the case, but keep in mind that immigration is actually sitting there waiting for people to put things in on their application that could be misrep or that's going to trigger them to do an investigation. And so in this case, you know, Maria's mom had actually applied for permanent residency, but in a lot of other cessation cases, new refugee claimants don't have enough money or they don't realize that they need to apply for permanent residency. When you submit your PR application as a protected person, it's similar to a lot of other PR applications like a spousal or express entry, where it's going to say, what's your address history? What's your travel history? What's your work history? What's your personal history? And if people do not disclose that they've gone back to their country of origin or that they have traveled to another country, then immigration is going to nail them on misrep, right? And that can also trigger their investigation to do their cessation proceeding. And if you have submitted an application for PR and immigration's doing an investigation, your PR application is not going anywhere. Or if you apply for citizenship and you are even a permanent resident who is traveling on your passport and you had been a refugee, they can strip you of your permanent residence before you ever get to citizenship. It's routine for them. So a lot of people say, oh, a citizenship application, that's so easy. You just fill in the forms, you meet your 3 years of Canadian PR, you just fill that in. Well, I can't tell you how many times where I've been speaking with somebody and I have to ask them, were you a refugee? Were you a protected person? And have you ever traveled back to your home country, or even if you didn't travel back to your home country, but you used a passport from that country and you traveled anywhere else, you can get your PR taken away, you can get your refugee status taken away. You thought you were going to be a citizen, and now you're getting kicked out of Canada. So,
And oh, sorry, sorry, Alicia. Sorry.
I was just going to say the very last thing is, if you are a protected person, if you had a successful refugee claim, you have to apply for a protected person travel document. You cannot use the passport from your home country. Go ahead, Cedric.
Yeah, and just to add what you were saying, Alicia, right? We can imagine, right, as an immigration officer, you have, hundreds and hundreds of applications to process and go through, and you start reviewing the file, and you have 35 things to check, and you're planning to take the next hour to go through the file, and within 5 minutes you realize, hey, this employment reference is not signed. Oh, great. Close the file, send out the letter for incomplete, and on to the next file, right? Why would you spend an hour just to get to that point of going through the medicals, going through the language test, the educational credential, right? It's easier as for decision maker, right, in this context, to reject applications and not go through the whole application, right? So they're very diligent. They know what they're doing. They want to get through as many applications as possible, and they're not going to hesitate to return applications if the application is not complete from the very beginning. And this is what we see with clients who retain us after, right? Very simple mistakes, right? Color copies, wrong ECAs, very, very small mistakes that people that IRCC will jump on to refuse the application and essentially not process it.
Yeah.
And what Cedric is saying there is so important, because just because you get your application returned for maybe the wrong Australian police certificate, it does not mean that if you submit the correct Australian police certificate, your application is going to get approved. It just means the officer refused it for the easiest reason possible, and they haven't even looked at the rest of it. And there's, 25 other reasons they could find an error in it. So be careful with that.
You bet. All right, we are coming to the end of our little Halloween horrors here. And we want to thank all of you guys for joining us. This was kind of fun. I think it was more fun for me than anyone really. But this is stuff that is, we definitely didn't want to make it too lighthearted, because these are real people's lives that we're talking about here, who have hopes and dreams and aspirations, who've done everything that they believe in their power. But there's such this groundswell of belief out there that, immigration lawyers are just there to take your money, that they're expensive, that the value they offer is, you can just get it all for free on the government website, right? And that's what IRCC tells you. But the reality is they're not going to be there if you miss something. They're not there to check to make sure your reference letter is correct, that it's signed. They're not going to be there to make sure that your proof of funds are correct, or the worst of all, sometimes that translations are done properly. And like both Cedric and Alicia said, they're going to take the path of least resistance because they're under an enormous amount of pressure to process applications, especially since the pandemic, when every officer has massive, quotas that they have to meet each day in terms of approvals. And if they can just find something easy and refuse it, they're going to do it. And we don't know what the world's going to look like for express entry. Some people are asking a few questions. I'll pull up just a few last ones. Don't do any of the super chats, you guys, because we're going to be here Wednesday and we're going to be here Thursday, and Cedric will be going, and we'll get those questions answered for you. But at this stage, I'll just hit on a couple little things. Rashmi says, would there be a temporary pause to draws due to November 16th tier system changes? Maybe, although remember, there's been changes before in express entry. They didn't need to pause anything. In effect, they have 2 weeks between draws to sort it out, to make the changes, and they haven't stopped issuing ITAs because of that. So who knows? Maybe. And then the other question here from Reggie says, should we show source of any huge amounts transferred to our account, which happened around 5 months before your application submission? Yes. Simple as that. All right. Okay. thanks so much for tuning in, you guys. Thanks, Cedric and Chanelle and Alicia. This was a lot of fun. And those of you who are wondering how to track us down, I've been posting this here periodically. All you have to do is just go to holthelaw.com, click on book a consultation. If we slide over here, click to speak to a lawyer, and you can easily go here, and it's simple click of a button, 2 clicks, and you can choose the date that works best for you. And I also want to point out that we have a lot of information on here. So legal help, if you need it, there's information that talks about some of the options that may be available for you. We have a whole section on family and visiting and studying and immigrating. So check these out. And above all else, go to our blog post, because it is absolutely full of tons of up-to-date blogs on all topics, including tier. You can see here, and it's constantly, we're adding new content. I want to also let you guys know, if you scroll down to the bottom, actually we'll go to our main page here. And if you scroll down, and in the links, there's links in the description to this video as well. If you scroll down, you will see that we have at the bottom here, right here, you can subscribe to our newsletter, and that's curated right now by Cedric, and it's awesome. We do a lot of things that are, just to get you thinking and to get us thinking and get our opinions. And sometimes we have different thoughts on things as well. But that's the fun part of being in a firm like ours, is we have the ability to learn from each other. And so that is the nature of it. Okay, Eric says, this was great. Thank you for answering my question. And Reggie says, thanks. Appreciate your help. Absolutely. All right, guys, let's wrap her up. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you. Cedric, when are you coming live? When are you going live again in your next Q&A? Do you have another one lined up? Are you going to join me? What's the plan?
We sure do. So I do Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 a.m. Toronto time, and I was talking about this with a few friends, and they said, "Who gets up at 6:30 a.m.?" I might change it, but I do telework. So if you're outside Canada, 6:30 a.m. Toronto, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yep, perfect. And then on Wednesday at 10 a.m. and Alicia and myself, we're back again 11 a.m. on Thursdays. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Take care, and we'll see you again in another live.